Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Beyond Horizons. Over the last 10 episodes, the space program has been working towards an exoplanetary launch pad here on the moon, and we've slowly been carving out the surface for that location, and now that we're getting pretty close to finishing that job, it's time to think about more infrastructure surrounding the project. So say hello to Hammerhead Station. This will be our refueling outpost in lunar orbit so that anything that we might launch from or to the moon will be able to refuel here. You might notice it's got loads of docking ports, and most of them are for fuel tanks, but I also want to attach an ISRU to the thing because I think it might be quite fun to, mine ore off the surface of the moon and then bring it up to orbit where we'll convert it into fuel. And on top of that, since launching this station, I've got a contract to add a scientific research lab to the station, which it doesn't really need, but it's a lot of money, this contract, so I'm going to do it. And also I can configure the lab with new experiments, so we can actually get a bit of science out of the process as well. Honestly, the main goal of this station will be refueling the Moonfly, which is going to be taking astronauts to and from the surface base, which we will catch up with a bit later, because as of right now, this station isn't crewed, it's all autonomously being run, but it's not really designed to hold crew for a very long time. I figure I can add more habitation modules as the station expands. And if you look at the decal there, you can see the little moon crescent with the stars. That is a logo that I've actually made for the space program. I think it's going to be more for the tourist side of things. And again, maybe next episode we'll get to see that actually on one of my SSTOs. I thought, since we're going to be taking tourists all over the system, we better have a nice logo to do that with. So everyone can look at our amazing space planes and know who made them. But anyway, the space program continues to churn on in the background, and so we move over to Demeter, which is on her way to Jool. We had a mid-course correction at that I completely forgot to record, so we're just going to have a nice cinematic and have a look at the orbit that will eventually be getting into Jool around 3 years, I think it's going to take, so it's going to be a while before we see this one again. You know, speaking of mistakes, the last episode was riddled with them, and someone commented, get some sleep, and to be fair, I was quite tired, both when recording and editing the video, so that was a pretty accurate comment, so hopefully we won't make that many mistakes this time. But yeah, anyway, here's the orbit we're going to be getting into. You can see it's just a bit outside of Lathes orbit. I figure as we circularize there, we'll probably get a lot of encounters with the moons, and we can just figure out which ones we'll visit and in which order when we get there. I don't think it's too important. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be about 3 years until we get out there, so we have a lot of stuff to do in the meantime. One thing we'll definitely have to do before then is improve our communications network. You can see Dust and Echo on their way out to Dres have a pretty weak connection back to the KSC. The geosynchronous satellites that we launched, God, ages ago now, I think, are getting pretty obsolete. They just don't have the range that we need them to have. On top of that, I just think we don't have all that much coverage throughout the solar system, so I might send a few on solar orbit just so that we can, you know, get a few outposts so we can make sure we can keep communicating with all of our probes that are headed to the outer reaches of the solar system. So I mentioned earlier we're pretty much done with the excavation projects, and so here we are. This is where we're going to be building our launch pad. So next we're going to have to send up some construction equipment and all the resources necessary to build all of the launch pads and the assembly buildings and the refineries and all of that sort of stuff. I did want to have a look at and see if there were any Kerbal construct files I could download for more lunar inspired base assets, just because the ones that I've currently got installed are mainly for, you know, terrestrial buildings, which I don't think a normal assembly building will work here on the moon. I think we have to account for the low gravity and the radiation and all that. So if anyone knows any good ones, please let me know. Yeah, some like cool dome structures, or I don't know, actually, just whatever's out there. I've had a quick look, but I'll have to have a better look later. Anyway, we're just returning the construction vehicle Daedalus, which I spin out of control here because of the low gravity. I don't get very much traction on the gravel. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I think I might just leave it there because it looks cool. Maybe park it just outside of loading range just so I don't have too many vessels sitting around in one location. But yeah, it's time to return the crew of the Omega Advanced Station home. Well, actually, before they go home, they'll be spending a bit of time on the Hammerhead station, just making sure everything's in order, and maybe they'll be there for when we add new modules, or maybe I'll return them home first. I'm not really too sure yet. I haven't done it. I'll decide later. For now, we're just getting everyone inside the Moonfly and actually taking a bit of time to, you know, walk around the interior, because this IVA mod is pretty fun, and I like walking around inside, and actually it just feels a bit more immersive. As for the actual Omega base, again, I'm not sure what I'll do with it. I might get rid of it just, again, to lower the amount of vessels that my game has to load. You might see in a moment I've got get some pretty major lag spikes on the ascent with the Moonfly, and I'm a bit worried about my save file because it's getting to that point where things are running slower and the game is starting to struggle a little bit. So at some point I'll have to go through and do a bit of a cleanse with, yeah, there it is, the big lag spikes, and this is a 5 times speed as well, so in real time that was quite a slow one. But yeah, I might have to go through and cleanse some of the unnecessary ship files, just so that the game has a bit less to load at any given moment. I'm a bit worried that it won't last. Sometimes I've had save files conk out on me and just completely break, and I'm worried it won't last until we get the Eve mission done. So I'm thinking for this series, I'll definitely do the Eve mission if the game allows me to. And then from there, maybe I'll start a new save file and maybe a new series. I'm not sure yet. We'll have to see. You know, one of the weirdest ways I had a save conk out on me was the game itself was fine, but every time I loaded a vessel, all of the parts would just be wonky on their axis, and so the whole ship would look jagged and weird, and there'd be weird clipping issues. And it would be fine the first time I loaded it, but then the next time I loaded it, it would just explode because bits were clipping when they shouldn't have been. And I never found a fix for it. I tried loads of things and I lost loads of really cool missions. So I hope that doesn't happen this time. I think it should be okay. Not touch wood. I don't know. We'll have to see. But anyway, here we are. We are getting docked with the Hammerhead station. The rendezvous went very easily. It's a very easy thing to do in orbit around the moon, just because the orbits are much smaller and the speeds are much slower. So if you ever need to practice orbital rendezvous, try it around the moon first. Saying that after last week's embarrassment of a rendezvous, maybe it's me who needs to do the practice. But anyway, so we're just here docking up with the station, and like I said, the crew is going to spend a bit of time here. It's not really designed for long-term habitation, so we can't keep them up there indefinitely. So we'll probably, thinking about it, we'll have to bring them back before we expand the station. But like I said, we'll see as time goes on. I tend to do things pretty spontaneously, so yeah, we'll see in the future. Anyway, after all that yapping, we finally get docked to the Hammerhead station. So, last episode, Anthony helpfully reminded me that you can actually highlight all of the fuel tanks at once using the resources manager, but for some reason I couldn't get rid of specific ones without all of them hiding. You can see that the box menu for each one would collapse to just the title if I tried to get rid of some, and I couldn't figure out how to make that not happen. I don't know whether that's a bug because I've got a bunch of mods installed, or whether the game itself just doesn't like doing it. Eventually, I just had to deselect all of them and then manually select all the fuel tanks, which was a bit of a pain in the backside. But hey ho, you know, that's life. I tried to do it the quick way and it didn't work. So for now, I'll just have to stick to the long way around unless I can figure out why it's doing that and how I can stop it. But yeah, there we go. We've refueled the Moonfly. I think it should have enough fuel to get back into low Kerbin orbit, and maybe we can pick up the astronauts there via SSTO. But I'll be doing that in a future episode once I decide actually how I'm going to organize all of this. To finish up today's episode, we are going to be launching a very important part of the Eve mission. This is the surface return vehicle. This is arguably the most important part of the entire mission because without it, well, we can't put any astronauts on the surface because, you know, otherwise we'll strand them there and they'll die. This was an absolute pain to launch, and you're looking at my 5th attempt at launching this. I tried to hide some reaction control wheels in the main launcher there, but what ended up happening was that they became like a pivot point once I ditched the solid rocket boosters, and the whole rocket would just snap in half. Everything was auto-strutted. It should have been fine, but it just didn't work, so I eventually got rid of them, and it didn't do it anymore. Here I'm flying it very precariously, trying not to turn it too much just in case, but Yeah, it was fine on the 5th launch after I'd got rid of all the things that made it easy to fly. As for the return vehicle itself, I've gone through a few design iterations. So the one that I tested, how many episodes ago was that now? That must have been over 10 episodes ago. Worked fine on the descent, but it didn't work fine on the ascent, which is the important part. So I had to go back and test things. I went on a sandbox file and I would get things on Eve servers just so I could test it. Like I said, the biggest problem is the aerodynamic forces on Eve are ridiculously strong, so the main challenge is to ditch each asparagus stage without it crashing back into the rocket. But I think I've got something that's working well now. If we land it very high up on the peaks, it should be able to get into orbit. The bigger challenge was actually creating a landing frame for the thing. We're getting a good look at it now, so yeah, trying to make sure that the heat shields covered everything was fairly easy, but ditching the heat shields was the hard part. The problem with the inflatable ones is that they've got so much drag that they just want to crash back into the rocket as soon as I ditch them. The ones on the top are fine, the ones on the bottom, they don't want to play nice. So I've gone through many iterations of this thing, just trying to make sure that, yeah, we can actually get the rocket down on the surface in one piece. But there it is. That is what we will be sending to Eve. I have to send up a drive stage with this thing as well. I didn't do it all in one launch because, frankly, that would have been far too hard. I already had enough trouble with this launch. So, yeah, we'll do that separately. That'll be in another episode. And then we only have one more launch, I think, and then we'll be entirely ready for the Eve project. And just in time too, because the launch window is just a little less than a month away. So yeah, it's nice. We've got everything ready. We'll just get some crew up in the Hades and yeah, then we'll be on our way to Eve. But all of that will be in a future episode because that's pretty much all I've got time for today. Sorry, it's a little bit of a shorter episode this time, but I did have a bit more footage, but I want to save that for the start of the next episode because it is a nice city pop themed SSTO to the new Tavern 3 space station around the moon, but I won't spoil any more than that. Been a bit of a talky episode, so hopefully next time we'll have a few more cinematics, but anyway, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing to the channel, and if you want to catch up with older episodes, you can check out the playlist that this is in, or you can click on the screen here and it'll take you to hopefully a video that it thinks you might like. But I've been Moonfish 1001, and I will see you in the next video.